Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this first episode of Into the Unknown, I wanted it to be a little opportunity for you to get to know me, my origin story, my comic book issue number 1. Many of you do know me, but for those who don't, my name is Jeremy Swick, aka Sumo, aka J Swick, depending on how long I think we've known each other, or at least the context in which we've met. My birth name is Gerardo Eduardo Lopez. I was born in Guatemala City, Guatemala, in October of 1991. I was pretty much put up for adoption shortly after I was born. I had the absolutely incredible opportunity to come to the United States in 1992. I was about 10 months old when I came here. Guatemala was going through a very interesting time. They were in year 31 of a 36-year civil war that began in 1960. A lot of chaos was going on there. At the orphanage, I was dropped in my head and it cracked my skull in 3 places. I had a subdural hematoma, which is really just swelling of the brain, and the doctors down there were able to put an external VP shunt which drained the blood from my brain. When I got to the United States, they put an internal shunt in, which I still have to this day. The swelling was reduced, and I got some pretty cool scars out of it. That's thankfully all the real long-term effects I had. I grew up in Sussex, Wisconsin, a suburb of Milwaukee. Ended up being fortunate enough to go to school at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. And I always laugh because I started college on academic probation. I had pretty terrible grades in high school, but I know part of it was not really applying myself, and part of it was only really doing things that I liked. So I did real well in history class. I liked gym class. And I had a pretty nice setup by the end of my senior year. We were on block scheduling, so I only had like 4 classes a day. I would start it off with a gym class, do cooking class, and then another gym class if our football coach was crafty enough to make a different class. And then I'd finish my day off with like a U.S. constitutional law where we'd act out court cases. I earned my bachelor's in history, and it was one of those experiences where, again, I think I just kept doing things I liked. When we first got to freshman registration, there was this opportunity to sign up for this thing called a bundle. Shout out to the bundle. You guys know who you are. And we were able to, as the title might suggest, bundle our classes together. Which, for me, it was probably the easiest route. And I didn't have to think a whole lot because I didn't know what I wanted to take. And there were some history classes, so I'm like, this sounds interesting. Well, I'm so happy I did. When I got there, like my first day of classes, it's a small group of maybe 12 of us. And I got to see one of my good friends growing up, Sean. What up, Sean? But I really enjoyed my experience there my freshman year just because I was taking classes I liked, and I really started falling in love with history classes, which is something I think I already knew, but I didn't think much of it. I just liked how the classes were approached. So I always tell this story, but one of the greatest memories I have of history growing up was at the Milwaukee Public Museum. On the 3rd floor, I believe, there is a Guatemalan marketplace exhibit. And I remember, although I didn't understand everything, I knew where I was from. I knew a little bit about the culture, but not a whole lot. But one thing I do remember is that was the first time I saw myself in history, if you will. And probably around my sophomore year, talking to my advisor, who was also one of my favorite professors, about my plans, and she mentions, you've done a lot with history classes. You've taken just about all of them. Maybe you should see something, or maybe you should consider something in that field. Well, I think I fell into the classic trope. What are you going to do? Teach? I embarked on the educational path and wanted to be a social studies teacher. Well, it definitely didn't go as I had planned, but one of the things I'm most grateful for in that entire experience at the School of Education is really being able to hone and harness those soft people skills. I always joke, if you can get up in front of a classroom of students, especially some angsty middle school students, you basically can talk to anyone and do almost anything. And that really helped me later on in life. Well, I ended up returning to Eau Claire. Well, plot twist. I really didn't leave Eau Claire. I graduated in August of 2015 with my undergrad and started graduate school in fall of 2015. It was funny because as I was trying to apply and get in, I remember going to talk to one of my advisors about kind of my plan to go to grad school and what could we do with Eau Claire. And it's August and school starts the next semester. I got to figure out where I'm living. All the things need to come together. I always laugh because the head of the department rolled her chair down and said, I think you'll do all right. And they definitely helped me get in, helped me. It was funny because when I first started that first semester of graduate school, I was basically about to audit some classes because I knew once my paperwork went through, I'd be fine. But until then, I was kind of in a weird limbo where I wasn't quite a student, couldn't quite pick my classes, but I knew when they were. And you know what? It ended up working out. The next step was I needed a job. And I just remember, shout out to my guy, Dennis Beal, one of his jobs was to help students get jobs. And I had been working with high school and middle school students at Blue Gold Beginnings, mentoring them and just working with them on homework and just kind of life skills. And I loved doing that and still wanted to be involved with kids in some capacity. Well, that was great. I was able to get that back to an extent. Well, the other job was definitely not in my wheelhouse. I started the semester of my first year of graduate school working at Eau Claire Nature Academy, which was a preschool. I joked that the first time I changed a diaper was when I was 25. It was about 8 at a time working with 6-month-olds. And at one point during that semester, I'm going through school, doing all that and changing diapers, being around kids. And it was the first time I'd been around kids that young. And it was a lot of fun. It was just a different experience. But I also did get walking pneumonia and bronchitis at the same time. So when I got into Game of Thrones and pretty much watched that for 2.5 weeks straight. The new semester rolls around, and there's an opportunity to work at the university archives, someplace I had always wanted to be and I'd always wanted to work at because I always found it so interesting being on the 5th floor of McIntyre Library and seeing all the special collections. So for the next year and a half of graduate school, I was able to do that and sadly had to wave the daycare goodbye. Well, fast forward to 2016, I had the absolute incredible opportunity to be an intern at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. And Brent Hensel, he graduated from the University of Wisconsin Eau Claire about 10 years prior to me. He was out with the Patriots at the time. Now he's the Packers curator up in Green Bay. My professor saw that we were on very similar tracks, and we were able to get in contact, and he helped me get the internship at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So in 2016, I moved the summer to Akron, Ohio, packed my stuff up in my car and drove down there to a place I found on Craigslist. And shout out to Jacob and his family. They were amazing. It was a great place to stay. I thoroughly enjoyed my time in Akron. I got to be part of my childhood hero, Brett Lorenzo Favre, and be part of his induction and meet a lot of people that at that point, it was only a dream. It's something you think about as a kid that you're going to get to do this. Well, the amazing thing was the dream actually came true, and it really propelled me into my next phase. But of course, before that happened, I returned to grad school, finished my master's, wrote my master's thesis on college football stadiums in the 1920s, looking at the memorial stadiums at Illinois, Indiana, and Minnesota. And my love for college football continued to grow. Following grad school, I moved to the Wisconsin Dells and worked at the H.H. Bennett studio, which was just an incredible experience. And I truly appreciated my time there. I was there for about 6 months. And the first 3 months were just a regular internship. They had some more funding to keep me around for another 3 months. But due to that, I also lived behind a water park in the foreign exchange dorm where most of the students that visit in the summer live. It was quite a wild ride and a wild experience. Once that internship ended, I moved back home. I was working second shift, cleaning bathrooms at schools, which was very ironic because my background's in education and I'm cleaning up toilets at anywhere between 11 and like 2 in the morning. And it was one of those, really, I think, life changing and life altering experiences, because I think there was those voices on your sides that you're like, what did you do? You got 2 degrees in history. How many people warned you about getting one, let alone 1 degree, but 2 degrees in history? And this is kind of where you're at in the mornings. I was driving around gas stations, putting up gas station pump tops, those little signs for like a great clips you see. And the thing they don't tell you about is, in the middle of winter in Wisconsin, you can't wear gloves because you need to feel how they go into the placeholders. So right out of grad school, that's what I was doing for several months. I was fortunate I had the opportunity and I took it. I moved up to Minnesota to work at the Carver County Historical Society in Waconia, Minnesota. I had not really heard of Waconia, but I realized where it was, and I could live with some of my college teammates, and I loved living up in Hopkins, Minnesota. It was such a great place, and I really appreciated my time up there. Well, during this whole time period, I was waiting and hoping for this job I was working on, trying to get, which was being the historian and curator at the College Football Hall of Fame. I think I applied in September 2017, and eventually in about August of 2018, I was offered the job, and I packed my stuff up and moved the half that was in Minnesota and the other half that was in Wisconsin down to Georgia, where I spent 4 years in Atlanta working at the Chick-fil-A College Football Hall of Fame, as I mentioned, as their historian and curator. And it was one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had, and not just from the building exhibits and writing about histories of college football, but also the networking opportunities I had and to travel and meet people. And overall, it was just a incredible experience. 2018, I was living up in Minnesota. I was broke, like broke. And I wanted to figure out a way where I could make money, really at that point, just to pay rent and just to keep this museum dream alive. And I had the idea of what could I do at my house on my computer to make money. And after about 40 hours on Dr. Google and looking and watching 50 some hours on YouTube, I kind of had this idea to create a company, a social media company. I had always found interest in creating graphics and doing things like that, but had never really harnessed and really had never taken anything like that seriously. Just was things I would do in my free time when I was bored. And that is where SwickMedia was born, which is my company. We've been around since 2018. And it was one of those really, I think, pivotal moments for me to realize that I had the opportunity. And while I never saw myself in a creative sense, I can't make great artwork, I can't do anything like that, but I can make graphics, and I can, as you can see in a few different museums I've worked at, I can do a really good job curating exhibits, putting things where they need to be, and making it look nice, for lack of better words. And so that kind of stuck with me throughout my time in Minnesota and my time in Atlanta and my time now here, is using my social media experience to continue to work with people, work with different brands, and it's led to some incredible opportunities that I'm just very thankful for. Another big part throughout my life, since I should say since I've been 18, is playing rugby. I wrote my undergraduate capstone on early American rugby and how American football became the death sentence to American rugby. I was fortunate enough to play in high school. I was able to play 4 years in college. I was able to play in college, both in undergrad and graduate school. And rugby is one of those things that pretty much has just traveled with me everywhere I've gone. I moved to Atlanta and I joined Atlanta Old White, which was one of the best experiences I've been a part of. And I'm still friends with those guys to this day. And then when I moved back to Wisconsin, I've joined the Milwaukee Barbarians over this last year. And that's been a great experience as well. And you'll see with a lot of these, especially first interviews, how rugby has really impacted who I've met and the opportunities I've gotten because of the sport. I currently work in museums, and I currently work at the Wisconsin Black Historical Society in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And it's absolutely a joy to bring history to life. Working in the archives, I really never know what I might find that day. And it's just so fun for me sharing those histories, sharing those stories, because I firmly believe that everyone has a unique story to share. And that's one of these things about this podcast. I'm really looking forward to diving deep into people's histories and people's journeys. And I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. I'm just really excited to see where this podcast will go. And until next time.